Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Matt, and today I wanted to talk about having fun in language learning. And I think it's just something that's so important. And unfortunately, a lot of people aren't having fun or they don't really have a plan for having fun in their language learning. And when I think of fun, I'm talking about real fun in the language learning process, right? I think that for a lot of people, they're trying to find apps, they're trying to find methods that are kind of fun, but they're really not that fun at the end of the day. And I think that's why you see a lot of gamified apps out there, apps that try to make things a little bit more casual, a little bit more lighthearted, more fun, or like gamified, as I said, or try to tackle some of the more fun aspects of the language learning process. So, learning from speaking or learning from music or something along those lines. But what I really think is key is eventually to get yourself to a place where you're having fun in the language learning process, right? Compelling content and interesting methods are a core component of your language learning process. I think that's very critical. And obviously, at the beginning stages, that's very hard to do. You don't really have the vocabulary or maybe even the grammar foundation to really use a lot of these compelling activities in a very effective way. So I think that when we think about using fun and compelling activities in our language learning, we have to think about it in a little bit different of a way. So, with all that being said, you're probably asking, how do I actually have fun? That's great, but I'm a beginner. I've tried using the compelling content, I've tried using video games, Netflix, reading, and it's just not working out. So, how do I go about this? Well, I think that the first thing to realize is that if you're not at a stage of being able to use compelling content, probably the first thing that you should do is set a goal of getting there to eventually start using compelling content as part of your language learning process. And for most people, to get to that stage, it's really going to come down to vocabulary acquisition, acquiring a ton of words, acquiring the most common words in the language, and getting some sort of foundation in grammar. So, if you're not at that stage of being able to use compelling content, I think that is the two things to really focus in on. Primarily vocabulary acquisition, but then a little bit of grammar as well. And then the second thing, of course, is once you're kind of, at some degree of competency, right? Maybe not fluency per se, but past the beginner stage, I think it's worthwhile to try to use the compelling content, even if it's a struggle, even if it's difficult. And I think that there is a resistance to that a little bit sometimes because when you go about reading for the first time in a foreign language or trying to listen to interesting content, it's very difficult. You don't understand all of the content, right? You don't understand every sentence that you read, or a lot of the audio content is a wall of sound. But I think that it's worth struggling through to keep getting better at and to get some enjoyment out of it and some results out of it. And slowly over time, you're going to get more out of the compelling content. So, I think that, once you've gotten to some degree of competency past the beginner stage, I think it is worthwhile to struggle through the compelling content. It's going to be difficult. Don't expect the idea of using compelling and fun content in your language learning to be easy, right? If it was easy, there would be nothing to learn from it. So I think that's really worth considering and thinking about, as you go about using compelling content in your language learning process. So I wanted to briefly tackle each of the areas of compelling content, or at least some examples of compelling content to kind of provide a little bit of a guidepost on how to get there or how to get the most out of it. So let's kind of break it down just a little bit. So let's talk about audio content. If we think of two compelling activities with regards to audio content, this could be something like listening to podcasts in a foreign language about a subject that you like, or watching or listening to Netflix shows. And the thing that you have to realize with audio content is that it is something that is very difficult. It's just going to take a lot of time to get really good at listening in a foreign language because you're going to have to process the language very quickly. You're going to have to obviously know a lot of the words that are coming at you and process it, very quickly, as well as the grammar, and that makes your kind of comprehension of the material difficult at times. So I think that it's worth just kind of noting that as you try to use audio content that's compelling, it's going to be difficult, right? You're going to want to translate in your head, even though that's probably a little too slow of a process to understand the content coming at you. But you're going to get better over time. And luckily, listening is one of the easiest things that you can do. You know, you can do it while you are doing other activities in your life, whether that's cleaning, cooking, commuting, things like that. So I think that it's worthwhile once you kind of have some degree of foundation to just start listening as much as you possibly can. Do it with other activities as part of your daily life, right? When you go and exercise, when you are cooking, when you're cleaning, when you're just multitasking, right? I think that is a good way to get a lot of listening practice in and really just keep at it. And, you know, slowly over time, you'll start to recognize more words. You'll be able to identify and just notice grammar. You'll be able to understand more and more sentences. You'll stop translating in your head. It just takes a lot of time. And there's just really no way around it other than getting the vocabulary and keep practicing. So I think with listening, it's just important to realize that there is kind of this long grind with it, but you should definitely try to listen as much as you possibly can. And the more that you do it, the better you're going to get in tandem with, you know, obviously getting better at vocabulary and grammar. So if you're trying to use listening content, Netflix shows, podcasts, things like that, just keep going. You know, there's going to be instances where you're going to watch a Netflix show and you really only know so much of what happened. Keep going. You're going to keep getting better. Just make sure that you're doing all the parts of the language learning process, right? Acquiring more words, getting better at listening, you know, learning some grammar here and there, and slowly but surely, the compelling content I think will get more and more enjoyable. So, another compelling activity is reading. And reading isn't just a compelling activity, but it's also an amazing way to learn a language, especially past the beginner stage. It's a great way to acquire vocabulary. It's a great way to learn grammar because you're seeing the grammar in context in real life situations. And it's just great for acquiring specialized vocabulary, less common words, but also just the common words in a language because you know you're going to see them again and again in sentences and you're going to see the grammar again and again, and so it's this kind of natural review mechanism of the words and the grammar itself. And I think that with reading, probably a lot of people are intimidated by it a little bit just because when they first try to tackle reading, it is just difficult. They don't understand every sentence. Maybe they're reading at a slower pace compared to their native language, and I think that once again, like listening, you have to kind of realize that there's going to be these instances where you don't understand the meaning of a sentence or you don't know every word in what you read. And I think that you need to be okay with that and keep going. And despite the difficulties that you'll run into with reading, it still is an amazing way to acquire vocabulary. So it is worth struggling through as well. But just kind of go in with the expectation that it's going to be difficult at times. There's going to be instances where the grammar is, you know, in such a way where you're not going to understand the meaning of a sentence, or you're not going to know certain words, or the meaning of a sentence in general. And sometimes it's just a matter of changing the content or going to something a little bit more easy. But I think it's worth struggling through. And the thing is, you know, when we're talking about reading, um, you know, there's so many aids out there in terms of things that you can use to help you along the way, whether it's, you know, reading apps, plugins, and things like that that will kind of help the process, right? Help you to translate words effectively, or just, you know, references for those words or grammar. So I think that, you know, try not to just read like a paperback book, right, where you have to look up words, you know, on your phone, and it's just really inefficient and slow. There's so many apps, and plugins, and kind of resources to kind of facilitate the reading process in general. So I think that when you approach reading, you want to try to use those kind of resources, those auxiliary elements. To help you in the reading process. That's going to make reading way more enjoyable and way easier and more effective in the learning process. But just expect some struggle with reading, but it's just an amazing way to get better at the language, and it's something not to be intimidated about, I think. And the last compelling activity that I want to talk about is speaking. And with speaking, like any other skill, you have to put a lot of time in and practice into it to get really good at it. Now, that being said, though, the input based activities that you do, like learning words or picking up grammar, is going to help your speaking overall. It's going to help you to be able to speak about a lot of different subjects, to speak with more complexity, and things like that. Now, with speaking, I think that probably a big obstacle that people kind of run into is they just think that they're not good enough. But really, past the beginner stage, I think you should just jump into it and just start practicing your output. It can be a lot of fun. And while it might be a struggle at the beginning, I think it's worth kind of jumping into once you have some degree of foundation. Now, probably for a lot of people, they have a conversation. Maybe once a week with a conversation partner, but probably a big limiting constraint for at least some people is that it can be expensive getting multiple hours of a conversation partner each week. And so, some people don't even want to kind of spend money on that. And I think that there are options out there, free options that you can take advantage of to just practice more speaking in general. So you can find language exchanges with other people and let's say help them with their English for 30 minutes, and then they'll help you with the language that you're learning for 30 minutes. So there are ways to go about practicing speaking for free. You just kind of have to take that initiative. And I think that, especially if you're looking to not spend money, the way around that is to take initiative and put in some time and energy into kind of just seeking out the resources out there to practice speaking. And obviously, even outside of the conversation exchanges, you can practice shadow speaking, right? Don't overlook this, where you can just practice talking about a subject matter to yourself for 15 minutes or 30 minutes. Just say, today I'm going to talk about the news, but in the language that I'm learning, or I'm going to talk about how my day was. It's almost like you're doing a mock speech. So that's another way to practice speaking. Or, just once again, trying to find out those free resources out there if you're not looking to spend money, or just use conversation partners. So, really, I think with speaking, once you have that foundation, it's worth kind of jumping in and trying to get better at. And of course, you want to just beyond just taking the leap of speaking, you want to realize that it's going to take some time to get better, and the rest of it is just taking initiative and going out and seeking the resources to practice speaking in general. So that's what I had to say on the subject matter of compelling activity. You should definitely be using it in your language learning, or at least setting a goal to eventually start using it. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.